Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Hope you're doing well, you, your family, your team, everyone around you. I want to talk today about disagreement and finding common ground. There's so much disagreement and divisiveness and polarization in our country, our world these days. And that's been true for quite some time, but it feels like it's, I don't know, getting to a bit of a fever pitch. And so much of my work for, the last 25 years has been in different ways and different forms, trying to assist people and leaders and teams to find common ground, to navigate through disagreement and conflict and challenge. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine not that long ago, and he's someone who I disagree with politically, and we sometimes talk about politics, not all the time. But it was interesting because we were just having a conversation, sharing some thoughts and ideas and perspectives on some things that are going on in the world and the country right now and just in general. But I noticed, as we often have the case, have the ability to do, we were able to just really listen to each other and discuss some things. And, I was consciously trying to just listen and be curious and not defend or try to persuade or and we were both commenting on, and I find this to be true as I travel around the country and around the world, at our concerns about the level of divisiveness and polarization. And what was interesting, I was actually on my way to speak at an event for one of our clients, and a lot of what I was talking about at that event to this group of leaders was, how do we find common ground? And we're going to disagree. We want to disagree. Disagreeing is healthy, is necessary. I often say, like, when I talk to a team or I'm talking to a leader and I say, how does it go around here when people disagree or when there's conflict? And if they say some version of, oh, everyone gets along great, there's not a lot of conflict, I'm always like, uh-oh, red flag, right? Because we want there to be healthy debate, healthy discussion, healthy disagreement so that we can challenge each other's ideas, so that we can have the best outcomes ultimately, and people aren't sitting on their hands or biting their tongues or afraid to speak up, because that has a lot of negative consequences. So let's take a look at this whole notion of disagreement, because again, we see it all over the place, whether it's in our families or our teams or our companies or our communities or the country or the world, right? Sometimes it's more specific and personal. Sometimes it's a bit more, communal or even global. Um, but I think that it's easy to point the finger and it's easy to blame certain people or groups or forces at play. Um, but a better way, I think, for us is to take a look at what's the world sort of mirroring back to us and what can we do differently, more effectively, so that we can navigate some of the disagreements and conflicts that arise for us, but also around us within, again, our teams and our families and our communities. There's a real cost to polarization, to, again, unhealthy disagreements. We stop listening, trust gets eroded, collaboration breaks down. There isn't that sense of connection or belonging, which, again, most of us want. Again, thinking about the politics of today, I mean, I've shared a bit about my own politics on this show. I try not to go down that rabbit hole too much here, simply because there's many, many outlets that, you can find for people sharing their political ideas or opinions or, thoughts or feelings, and people who are a lot smarter and more well-informed than I am. But I think, regardless of my own politics, as I travel around the country right now here in the US, and even when I'm traveling internationally and talking to people, like my friend and I were talking about on the phone recently, I think there is a deep concern about the level of divisiveness and polarization that exists. And again, depending on where you live and how you vote and what your politics are, you might have a different story than someone else as to what's driving that polarization and that divisiveness. But I don't think there are very many people, except for maybe the people who profit off the polarization and the divisiveness that are like, yeah, this is good, this is healthy, this is sustainable. And if we think about it in the context of our country or our world right now, and then we pull it back into our own families, our own teams, our own companies, it's not healthy and sustainable when there's that level of polarization or divisiveness, right? When marketing and sales are at each other's throats, when, you know, the product team and, the engineering team aren't aligned, or when, the legal team is fighting with everybody because, we're trying to do things differently or change or push or grow or scale. And, I mean, again, there are natural tensions that exist inside of organizations, big and small. There are natural tensions that are going to exist inside of families with generational differences or regional differences or whatever the case may be. But if, again, like there's a real cost when, communication breaks down and, it's like so and so and so and so and so and so don't talk to, Uncle Jimmy and their family because of, a fight over money or over something that happened at, a holiday gathering 3 years ago. I mean, these things happen. We're human, right? But I think that when these factions show up, morale suffers, performance suffers, communication suffers, connection suffers, and that's not what we want. And we know this neurobiologically. We're wired for connection. We're wired for belonging, but it's often our egos or the fear that pushes us towards separation or some sense of scarcity or some, right? There's a lot of things that ultimately can push us in a direction of polarization. I was saying to my friend as we were talking, one of the things about today, and again, I'm not anywhere close to the first person to talk about this. This is obviously widely understood, but the algorithms on our phones and with social media and with all the apps that we use change significantly what we see. So I go onto YouTube on a pretty regular basis and I'm fed more videos that the YouTube algorithm thinks I'm going to watch. And a lot of mine are, sports related or pop culture or the things that I'm interested in. But anything politically that I click on or watch, it's going to feed me more of that. That's true again on any of the social media apps. I start clicking on things or sharing things or liking things. It knows, oh, he likes that kind of stuff. Let's send him more of that because their goal, as we all know, is to keep us on those apps and on our device as much as possible so that they can sell us stuff, right? And again, that's the way the world works. That's the way technology works. And I know personally, most of us know the way the phones and the apps are designed, they're very addictive. And we live our lives, and you're probably listening to or watching this right now on a phone, right? Or some device that you move around with in the world. So again, I'm grateful for what our phones allow for us to be able to do in terms of communication and connection and sharing and insight and inspiration and all the things. And it's tricky, right? Because we're carrying around. I mean, again, when I think about like my dad who died back in 2001, if he came back to life right now, I tried to explain to him a smartphone or the fact that most of us consume the news through this device that we carry around in our pocket or our purse every day. And it's like TV shows and movies and news and sports and everything right in our pocket. And my dad would be like, "What are you talking about?" Right. And it wasn't like, I mean, we're not talking about, the golden age or many, decades ago. My dad died in 2001, which is, going on 24 years this December, which is a long time ago, but it's not like technology didn't exist and the internet didn't exist. And right, those things existed in my father's lifetime. So it's important that we're mindful of this as much as we can be. And look, I think one of the things when we have conversations about finding common ground or looking for places where we might, be more connected or aligned than we realize or more alike than we are different, I think there's this myth that somehow we have to all agree, which is not the case, by the way. We can find lots of common ground with people that we disagree with fundamentally, even on some pretty significant things. Now, admittedly, it can be hard. And again, whether we're talking about a political issue or a social issue, or we're just talking about different things that come up at work and in life, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, how do we get a group of people aligned to move in a direction when there's strong disagreements about the best way to go about it, or what's important, or what the priorities are, or what they should be, or what it actually means to live in alignment with our values and our mission and our vision? those are tricky things. I sit in those rooms a lot with senior leaders, really smart, committed, earnest people who want to try to do the right thing, who want to try to galvanize the people in the organization together to head in the most positive direction possible, to hit the goals, to produce the results, to deliver, you know, the product, the service that they're wanting to deliver to ultimately their, end users and their customers and all the different stakeholders involved. It's complicated. But I think that when we choose to look for and find common ground, we're actually basically saying that I'm choosing the relationship I have with this person or this group of people over being right. I'm choosing connection over control. And again, it doesn't have to be an either or. But I think sometimes what happens is, and I talk a lot about self righteousness versus conviction in my work. Self righteousness is, I'm right, you're wrong. And that creates a defensive response in the other human or other humans, even if we're being really nice about it and saying lots of, soft, nice words. When it's coming from a place of, I'm right, and if you disagree with me, you're wrong, that creates a binary, that creates disconnection and separation. Conviction, on the other hand, is, I believe this to be true. I'm willing to speak up about it. I'm willing to engage debate. I'm willing to, right, engage in the disagreement, let's just say, but I have enough humility, enough self-awareness to realize two things. First of all, I might be wrong. Ever been convinced you were right about something only to realize upon further reflection you were actually wrong? Yeah, like a lot, right? It's part of life. It's part of growth. It's part of what allows us to be human and make adjustments and change our minds and pivot and learn and evolve. But maybe it's not a right wrong thing. Maybe it's just a values thing. The other part of conviction is, can I at least acknowledge maybe there's another way to look at this thing that I can't currently see? Multiple things can be true at the same time. Your opinion and my opinion can both be valid in we hold those opinions, and they might be at odds with each other. So we don't have to agree. I mean, you could say that common ground kind of lives beneath our opinions. There's some level of shared hopes and fears or shared humanity. I often talk about common humanity down below the waterline on the iceberg, as I like to say when we're talking about the metaphor of lowering the waterline on the iceberg so we get sort of connected on a more vulnerable level. There's way more common ground down there. Because again, up above the waterline or even a little bit higher up, we have this opinion and someone else has that opinion, or we have this really strong belief and someone has a very different belief, and we can, but then the further down below the waterline we go, the more we get to joy and pain and gratitude and sadness and hope and fear and love and hurt. And I mean, the whole range of human emotions. And in experiencing those emotions, that's where we can find our common humanity. And look, it's not always easy to do for a lot of reasons. I mean, there are things that are scary to us. There are things we feel really strongly about. I was talking to a group last week, and we were talking about what are we afraid of in removing our self-righteousness and adding vulnerability, which is my, definition of authenticity is honesty minus self-righteousness plus vulnerability. That equals authenticity. You've probably heard me talk about that here on the show and elsewhere, because that's a core fundamental pillar of my work. And I was asking people, what makes that hard? What makes that challenging? And in this group of leaders that I was talking to, people were saying, well, sometimes other people are really self-righteous, or sometimes other people have really strong opinions. And if I don't sort of fight fire with fire, I feel like I'll lose out, or my voice won't get heard, or I won't advocate for the people who aren't in the room who need to be advocated for. And we were talking about the complexity of it and the challenge of it. And again, if everybody's playing by the rules of like the loudest voice wins or the strongest argument wins, sometimes we can feel, even if we don't want to operate or communicate that way, we can feel compelled to do that. This notion of kind of finding common ground or looking for where we have some similarities or where, we can connect on a human level, as important as that is. And I believe that to be so important in so many different contexts and relationships and aspect of life, of leadership, of work, of all the things that are most important, parenting. It's also vulnerable, and we can, and we probably all have at times been taken advantage of when we've operated that way. And so there is a risk to it. It is difficult. It can be scary. There are certain issues that are very hard for me to have an open mind about, or to be flexible enough that I can listen to other opinions that are in disagreement with my own, especially when I feel really strongly about it or very passionate about it, or I have a lot of lived experience with it, and someone else, in my judgment, may not, or I can sometimes take it very personally or feel invalidated. That's something for us to pay attention to and to honor and acknowledge. It is challenging for many of us, for most of us, to disagree with other people and to find common ground and figure out how can we connect. And it's not simply just agreeing to disagree, although that's part of it. And understand that, again, this myth that we have to all be in agreement in order to be connected, in order to have common ground, in order to align, none of that's true. So, what are some things that we can do? How can we more effectively find common ground, even and especially when things are tense, when things are polarized, when it feels like there's a lot of division, when we don't see eye to eye with another person who's important to us, or some of the groups and teams that we navigate inside of, and all the different ways we have to navigate that at work? The first thing that we can do is practice listening to understand, not to win. So we're really listening to understand, to try to understand where the other person, other people are coming from, not simply just waiting for our turn to talk so we can, argue back and counter argument and rebut what they say. I mean, look, sometimes when we get into a debate or a heated debate, or we're in that situation or that dynamic, it can feel like we have to do that. I got to be on guard. I got it, right? I get it. I come from a long line of debaters and arguers. Winning debates, winning arguments, unless we're in like a court of law or some place where it's understandable, it's just not that enjoyable. And it's not usually what's necessary or productive, especially in our personal relationships, right? You might be really smart and have lots of information and statistics and all kinds of stuff, but people don't really want to be around people who have to be right all the time and are constantly winning arguments. Now, look, in a business environment, in a situation where we're trying to get the best ideas to come forward, we want to create enough psychological safety so we can have those debates and discussions and we can challenge each other. But if the goal is to win the argument, that's that binary that sets up someone else or other people have to lose. And again, I live in the real world, and sometimes we got to make a decision, and some idea or something is the one that, quote unquote, is the winner, and the rest we're letting go. We're going to do this thing. But I think the more we can think about listening to understand and not simply trying to win, we're asking questions, we're trying to learn, we're not simply just debating all the time. There's a time and place for us to debate, absolutely. But I think many of us who either really like to debate or people who are scared of it, which is more, I think, the common experience, who shy away from it, I think sometimes we get into debates that aren't really debates. We can just have exchanges of ideas. And again, I realize we have different styles and cultures and backgrounds and ways that we operate. I was working with a team about a month ago, and their CEO was saying, "Come on, I want to hear more feedback. I want to know what's going on. Tell me, tell me." And he is a really smart guy and a really great leader and likes to really mix it up in debate. And I was debriefing with him and just saying, like, I don't know that you fully can see the impact of your style of communication on the team. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just you're the boss, first of all, so people are going to be intimidated by you. And second of all, when you engage with the team in the way that you like to banter back and forth, I think some of them are afraid to speak up because they don't really want to take on an argument with you or a debate with you. A, because you're the boss, and B, it's going to be hard to win that debate. And so we had an interesting conversation. So I'm like, look, don't be any different than you are. Be yourself, and just be aware that it might be stifling some of what you're wanting, which is more feedback, more engagement from the team. And there's not a one size fits all. There's lots of different ways to go about this. But the more that we can listen to understand, not to win, the more that we can kind of be in that questioning from an understanding place, not simply trying to just debate and argue so we get our point across and we ultimately win, that's going to help us find common ground. That's the first thing. Second thing is, and related very much, is lead with curiosity. Just be curious. Tell me more about that. That opens doors. That opens different dialogues versus you're wrong or I disagree with that. I mean, again, if you feel that way very strongly, it's okay to say it. I disagree with that. And when we do that, when we tell someone they're wrong, by the way, that's the ultimate self-righteousness. You're wrong. Now, look, sometimes someone might be factually incorrect. And you can point that out, but there's a way to go about that respectfully with some grace, with some kindness. The moment that we say you're wrong, the person gets defensive and either shuts down or wants to fight back. And now we're in a who's the better arguer, who's the better debater. But tell me more, or I don't see it that way. I'd love to know more about why you see it that way or how you see it that way, or I'd love to understand that more fully because to me, that doesn't make sense. Again, you can say things and be willing to challenge and engage someone, but lead with that curiosity. And maybe you're not. I mean, again, we don't want to inauthentically be curious. If you're not curious, if you don't really want to have a discussion, if you've made your decision and you're like, look, we could talk about this ad nauseum, but I've already decided what I'm going to do or what we're going to do. And maybe you're the boss and that's how it's going to go. Or I've thought about this for a long time. I'm not very open minded about it. Okay, like at least have the courage to be honest in that way. But if we lead with curiosity, if we do actually want to find common ground and we're interacting with another individual or a group of people who see things very differently than we do, the best path for us to find that common ground is just to be curious. Third thing we can do, and I've talked about this a lot on the show over the years in different contexts, but is assume positive intent. Assume that people aren't trying to hurt you or others. They're usually, even if they're coming at you pretty hard, or even if you don't like what they're saying or how they're saying it, they're usually expressing some kind of unmet need or fear, right? If you think of the work, the great work of Marshall Rosenberg of nonviolent communication, he talks a lot about needs, like people are expressing there's something that they're needing or at least wanting. And if you can be curious, right, back to what we were talking about just a minute ago, and try to understand what's the need, what's the unmet need, or maybe even what's the fear, right? People are often, it's again, this doesn't justify people's, negative behavior or people lashing out. I'm not saying that. But a lot of times when people get really upset, or maybe they get really defensive or come on really strong, they're usually afraid of something. And if we can get underneath what they're afraid of without judging them, without psychoanalyzing them, but just trying to assume they're not waking up in the morning saying, you know what I'm going to do, I'm going to piss everyone off, I'm going to just be really difficult, I'm going to be no, there's some positive intent there. Our job can be, if we want to find common ground, try to find it, and maybe even also express what our own intention is. Why are we engaging in this conversation? Or even if it's, we're at odds with someone else. Like what I want is for us to be able to understand each other. What I want is for us to be able to move forward in a positive direction together, even if we don't see eye to eye on this thing. But assuming that people aren't out to get you. And as someone who has spent more time in my life than I'd like to admit, being vigilant, watching my back, often assuming negative intent, doesn't really serve us, doesn't usually help us. It doesn't usually not only endear us to others, but set up an environment that makes it easy for us to connect and ultimately trust each other. And yeah, we are going to get burned sometimes. Yeah, we are going to get taken advantage of or let down or our feelings hurt or people will lie to. It happens, right? But I don't think like constantly being vigilant and assuming negative intent and watching our back all the time, unless we're literally working in some kind of life and death environment where doing that would be significantly problematic. I think most of the time, you know, Michael Beckwith likes to call it conscious naivete, like choosing to be naive, not in a negative way, but just I'm going to choose to be open. I'm going to assume positive intent. Right? What was the thing that I had a mentor that used to say, there's two things you could do, and if you did these two things, it would dramatically improve the quality of your life. The first is to be easy to impress, and the second is to be hard to offend. That's assuming positive intent. Easy to impress, hard to offend. Most of us have it the other way around. Hard to impress us, we get offended like that, right? The fourth thing we can do is see if you can find shared values with other people, even and especially when you disagree. Look, we might disagree on the how, like the best way to go about it. Again, just think about an argument with your spouse about parenting. What's the best way to keep our kids safe? What's the best way to empower them? What's the best way to inspire them? What's the best way to teach them values? And right, we want that. If you, I mean, and maybe you're still together, maybe you're co-parenting and you've split up. There's a lot of dynamics that go into it. Maybe your kids are little, and we're talking about babies, toddlers. Maybe they're school age kids. Maybe they're teens and young adults like we have. It's complicated at every level. At least my experience of parenting, but oftentimes Or again, inside of a company, when we talk about leadership or we're talking about vision or, prioritization, what is it we want? Can we get clear on some of we want success, we want safety, we want health, we want people to be bought in, right? For our kids, we want them to be strong, independent, healthy, functioning, productive humans in the world. How we go about it, okay, we can debate that, we can discuss that, we can challenge ourselves and each other on that. But if we can align or at least find some shared values, oh, we both want, the team to feel safe and heard. We just have very different ideas about how to go about that. We both want our kids to be safe and healthy. We just have different ideas about how to go about that. We both want the freedom of expression and openness in our society, whatever. Oh, but we have different ideas about the specifics of that, right? It's easier to debate and discuss the how when we at least acknowledge that some of the whys, if not many of them, are shared. And again, nobody has all the best ideas. No group of people, no, right? And in a team environment, it's about how do we share our different ideas and our different perspectives so that we can create the best possible result. And then the fifth thing is really practicing empathy and humility, understanding that we don't have to lose our own truth. We don't have to give up what we believe, what's important to us to make space for someone else's. Multiple things can be true at the same time. Now, again, if there's a correct answer and an incorrect answer, okay. But most of the time in life, when we're dealing with disagreements in our families, in our teams, even in society, there is not a correct answer and an incorrect answer. There's a whole bunch of possibilities. There's a whole bunch of perspectives. There's a whole bunch of ways to go about it that are subjective. And even if they're based on data or they're based on facts or they're based on experience, it's still like, I wish things in life, tough decisions in life, business decisions, financial decisions, parenting decisions, leadership decisions, societal decisions, I wish they were easier at times myself. But a lot of the challenges we face these days are complex and multi-layered and multifaceted. The more we can have empathy for ourselves and others. Oftentimes, I mean, as we're dealing with the world today and artificial intelligence and the nature of the, political polarization and everything that we've been dealing with the last, 5, 6 years coming out of the pandemic and the changes here and the technology and the hybrid working and I mean, on and on, you name it. There's so many things that like we've never dealt with before. We've never had to make some of these decisions. Right? I mean, I'll say to Michelle sometimes when we're talking about, parenting decisions, I'm like, my parents didn't have to make these same decisions. And again, I'm not throwing my parents under the bus. I'm just like, the world was different. So can we have empathy for ourselves, first and foremost? Can we have empathy for others? Again, assuming positive intent, right? People are doing the best that they can based on everything they have at their disposal. But we're not perfect. We're not robots. We're not machines. We're human beings with all of our imperfections and all of our insecurities and all the things that we're dealing with. Can we have some empathy for ourselves and each other? And can we have a sense of humility? That sense of, right, the times in life when we've really known for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we were right, only to realize upon further reflection we actually weren't. And you know what? We make the best decisions we can based on everything we have at our own disposal right now. And whether it's in a day or a week or a month or a year, we can look back and decide, oh, that was a really good, healthy, productive decision, or maybe it wasn't, but this life thing is messy and confusing. And having that empathy and humility is super important. So the 5 things that we can do to practice finding common ground, especially when we disagree with others, is first, listen to understand, not to win. Second, lead with curiosity. Third, assume positive intent. Fourth, find some shared values as much as we can, the why, even if we disagree on the how. And then fifthly, practice empathy and humility. If we do these things as to the best of our ability, we'll create more psychological safety and create more space for disagreements to happen in a productive, healthy way. We'll model that vulnerability and curiosity for the people around us. And it'll allow us to celebrate diverse perspectives as strengths, not as some kind of issue to overcome, right? This show is called We're All in This Together. Belonging isn't about sameness, it's about inclusion. It's about, again, finding common ground. And look, the world is full of disagreement right now. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. It doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. So, what would it look like for you in your life with the people closest to you, with the people you work with, even some people maybe you don't know personally, but you interact with or at least see online for better or worse? Can you challenge yourself? Can I challenge myself? Can we challenge ourselves to find common ground, even and especially when we disagree? We can't control all of the noise and all the stuff happening out there, but we can choose to bring a deeper sense of compassion and curiosity and empathy to the conversations, to our relationships, to our teams, to our companies, to our communities. And if we all choose to do that a little bit more, I think we'll be even more effective at finding common ground, even when we disagree. So, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As always, I appreciate it. Make sure to hit the follow or the subscribe button if you haven't already. And we love it when you leave a rating or a review right here in whatever podcast app or platform you listen to, or a comment down below if you're watching it on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's some links down below where you can connect with me on social or find out more about me and my work. Best place to do that always is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Until next time, keep bringing your whole self to work and to life. And remember, we're all in this thing together.